All right, you may have heard that tone there, just indicating that we are recording this meeting. And welcome everybody to tonight's public meeting about traffic calming on Barnes Cove Drive. My name is Jeff Hammond. I'm a consultant working for NDOT. That's the Nashville Department of Transportation that you see in the lower right-hand corner. And our role is to help facilitate this program, particularly these meetings and the design plans and all that go into traffic calming projects. We are here specifically tonight to talk about Barnes Cove and appreciate everyone's attendance and time this evening. We do have Councilman Rutherford with us. We appreciate you joining us, Councilman. Anything you want to address with the group before we get started?
Yeah, just real quick for anyone who may not be familiar with me, I am the council member for District 31. And I want to say thanks to those who are joining on this call and your willingness to be participants in this effort. Also grateful to the NDOT folks for just for making themselves available and for doing this and for all that they do, not only in our area of town, but really all across Metro. And I know we have seen a fair amount of traffic calming projects in our area, and that has not always been the case. And so I'm grateful to have played at least a small part in being able to secure funding and getting the support that these projects need. And just lastly, I'll give a full disclosure here, just so everyone is aware. I live in Barnes Cove. In fact, I live on Barnes Cove Drive, so this is my neighborhood and my street. In terms of discussion and whatnot, I'm going to take a fairly neutral stance just because it's my own street. So just want to make sure everyone was aware of that. Just putting that out there for full disclosure purposes. And so with that, I'll hand it back to NDOT.
Well, thank you, Councilman, and that is not why we're here tonight. We did not pick the project because you live there. We'll talk about how it did come to be. I didn't even know that. So that's good to know. I appreciate you and your support and the hard work of all our council members. It is a tough job, and appreciate people stepping up and doing that and the support that we get for this program and many others. Just a couple of housekeeping things. I did mention that we do record these meetings, and the reason we do is so that if you have a neighbor or someone who wasn't able to attend with us tonight, you will have this available to you. You can pass along to them. These recordings are made available on the NDOT Traffic Calming website. If you're not familiar with that, we'll get you some information on how to get there, but give it a week or so, and these meetings are usually posted there. Secondly, we do try to make this as much like as we're in the same room together as possible. So if at any time you want to come unmute, you do have the ability to do that and find the little microphone button or whatever it looks like on your end and click that and feel free to make comments, ask questions as we go. You can also use the chat feature. If you see that, I try to monitor that as we go along as well. I think that's about it. A couple of things that we want to do tonight. We'll try to be as efficient as possible. These meetings usually last about 40 minutes or so, just depending on the conversation, but we'll try to move through it as quickly as we can and get to the real meat of what we want to do, which is a little bit later here, and show you some information and get some input from you, some reaction. But we do want to start by giving a little bit of an overview of the traffic calming program and how Barnes Cove got inducted into it. We'll then move into looking at some of the tools that we have in our toolbox, and then a very preliminary idea for what traffic calming might look like on the street. And then we'll leave you with some next steps, what you can expect from us, some time frame information, and those types of things. The QR code that you see on the screen there on the right-hand side also gives you another opportunity to give some feedback to us. It's a platform called Engage Nashville. And it's really a pretty neat thing. It's really a clearinghouse for all different types of programs, plans and programs put on by NDOT and maybe a couple of other departments as well. But you can click on that, kind of navigate through, find the Barnes Cove Drive traffic calming project, and there you'll find you'll have a map and find opportunities to leave comments specific to this project as well. So feel free to use that. A little bit about traffic calming. Most people are familiar and getting more familiar all the time as more and more of our projects roll out. Councilman Rutherford alluded to that earlier. You've seen some in this area, so no doubt you have encountered some of the work that we do. But we do focus on residential street programs. We don't traffic calm industrial areas or commercial areas. We really try to focus on residential because number one is safety, but also it's a big quality of life issue. And we know as you live in your neighborhood and walk in your neighborhood and drive in your neighborhood, the presence of people just driving too fast can be a real problem. So we really try to focus our resources on where you live. We focus on trying to bring about slower speeds. That's as opposed to trying to reduce the levels of traffic. We'll talk some about that. And it's really difficult to push traffic somewhere else, especially in an area like this. You have some topography. You don't have a real clear grid network, so there's not a lot of alternatives to some of these roads. So we're not trying to push traffic somewhere onto somebody else's street. We're just trying to get it to slow down and drive more responsibly in your neighborhood. And lastly, we focus on physical solutions. In the past, we've focused probably more on pavement markings and signage and things like that to try to convey a message. But we have found that nothing is as effective as putting something physical in the street that you might have to drive over or drive around, and that we have seen brings about the greatest reduction in speed. Not to say that there aren't other tools. We'll talk about some of those, but that's what we do in this program. We know we're not the only game in town. We have great partners in both the education and the enforcement aspect, particularly MNPD. And a lot of people, when we get into these meetings, they'll say, "Can't we just park a cruiser and write some tickets? And wouldn't that help?" And I would agree. I think it would, at least for the short term. But we also know that our police officers are out there doing very important work, and traffic enforcement isn't always, at the top of their priority list. And so, with that, NDOT steps in as the manager of our public rights of way and says, "Hey, we can do something about that. There's an engineering solution to some of this, or at least an engineering aid." And so that's what this program seeks to do. But we do correspond with police and with fire department, especially of our emergency responders, just to make sure that what we are doing is in concert with the bigger service scheme for Davidson County. I mentioned safety. One of the reasons we do this program and why I think it has gotten to be very, very popular is because of the evident safety implications that it has. We know that the streets are not just for driving. You guys are fortunate that you have sidewalks over, I think, all of this street, at least on one side. But a lot of our neighborhoods in Nashville do not have that, as you know, and so this particularly becomes an important statistic for them. In the unfortunate instance where there could be a pedestrian versus vehicle crash, if that vehicle is going slow, you have a much higher probability of walking away from that crash as a pedestrian. That probably stands to reason, but statistics like this are just a good reminder of the implications of people driving too fast. And so we like to remind people of that. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir a little bit. If you took the time to be here tonight to learn about traffic calming and are interested in this, hopefully you're not part of that, part of the issue. But we do have these issues all over Davidson County. We like to show this. I've mentioned that it's a popular program, and this is really just gets to how popular it is. In this latest cohort that Barnes Cove is a part of, we have still over 700 requests for traffic calming on individual streets just like this one. So you're not alone. You're not seeing things that are not being experienced in every corner of our county, and it's really too bad. But it's just that yours has gotten to a level that supersedes a lot of these other requests. So just to put that in context, we're able to do a project, about 50 projects a year. We do those in two different cohorts. This is the second one of the year. And so you're kind of going through this process along with 25 other neighborhoods at the same time. We like to kind of pause right here and make mention of one other opportunity or avenue you have for kind of similar type aid or service requests from Metro. We're going to talk about very specific tools that we have in our toolbox with this program, but a lot of times people may say, you know, what we really need is a sidewalk, or what we really need is another always stop just to make everybody come to a stop sign. And those are fine requests, and they certainly have their place. It's just not something that we do with this program. But where you would make those requests is at hub.Nashville.gov. And so we like to remind people and maybe make them aware, if you're not, there's something called Hub Nashville. It's hub.Nashville.gov. You can also just call, pick up the phone, call 311 and speak to an operator there. Again, kind of like that service I mentioned earlier, this is a clearinghouse for just requests of Davidson County. If a sign gets knocked down, if you see a traffic signal on flash, if your trash doesn't get picked up, if you know, there's all kind of services that are available here at Hub Nashville. So avail yourself of that. It's really a great tool, great service for Davidson County residents. But back to Barnes Cove specifically, when we say we have 700 requests for streets just like this, obviously we can't do all of those in the very near term. So we have to prioritize the streets that are going to get this attention. And this is how we do it. Every time an application comes in for one of these streets, we go out and collect data. And again, we do this in 2 different waves throughout the year. The data that we collect, this is how we score it. And 70% of that score comes from data that you probably would expect. It's the number of cars driving on your street every day and how fast those cars are going. That's the bulk of the data that we use. But there are other things too. We look at, are there destinations in the area that might make it more likely that someone is trying to walk? So for instance, if the street is near a school or near a library or near a park, things like that, that increases your score. If you have accommodations or facilities that make it easier to be a bicyclist or be a pedestrian, in your case, you have sidewalks, that actually lowers your score a little bit, with the theory being, you know, if you have sidewalks, you can at least not be walking in the traffic, which a lot of our neighborhoods don't have. So that's part of it. And then lastly, is there a documented case of a pedestrian crash in the area? So all of that also goes in to the other 30%. We take all of that data, roll it all together, come up with a composite and rank those, and take the top 24, 25 projects twice a year. Fortunately or unfortunately, I guess, Barnes Cove made that cut, and you're in the top 25. And at this point, there's no longer any discussion of, is there a project? Are we going to do anything about traffic calming, or is there a funding? You are in the program now. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have speed cushions or anything else. That's what we want to talk about tonight. But you know, you are in the program, have been recognized as being a recipient of traffic calming. That can just take various forms. Here's some of the data that is specific to your street. First one is called 85th percentile speed. That's just a statistical way that we look at the speed data that we collected. What it essentially says is that 15% of all of the cars that we counted on the street were going faster than 35. Some of them, I'm sure you had this experience, we hear it about every meeting, some of them are going much faster than 35. And so we don't really capture that. We just know that there's a kind of a threshold there that is 35. That's pretty average for the streets that we're doing traffic calming on. So, you know, that's standard. The volume that we counted is about a little over 2,200 cars a day. That probably sounds like a lot to you. It's a pretty healthy volume, but it's also, again, pretty typical for what we see. We will do traffic calming with some of our most common tools up to about 5,000 cars a day. So we're not going to be out traffic calming Nolensville Road or Old Hickory Boulevard in your area. Those are just too high volume streets, and that probably stands to reason. But 2,200 cars we would do. The width is 30 feet, roughly. We'll come out and we'll make more detailed measurements as we get further into this process, but we know that it's about 30 feet wide. You've got some parking that happens, you know, kind of alternately on each side of the street. That's wider than most. Most metro streets probably about 22 to 24 feet wide. So this one's built a little bit wider in the subdivision, probably, with the intent that there would be some parking. So not unusual, nothing we can't deal with, but it is wider than most. Typically, when you have a wider street, that often leads to higher speed. The more the theory is, the more space it feels like you have, the more clear sight distance you have, and all of the more comfortable you are going faster. So that's not unusual. And then the segment that we are looking at from Barnes Road to Avery Park Drive, that's the entire length of Barnes Cove Drive, about 3/4 of a mile. And here it is in a map form. This map is interactive. It is also on NDOT's Traffic Calming webpage, meaning you can zoom in, zoom out, pan all over the county, and you'll see different colors represented here. And I'll just point out a couple. You guys are red right now. You see the limits of the project, again, from Barnes Road at the north to Avery Park at the south, just meaning that we're here tonight. We're in the very early stages of the process. You see some other lines on there. The blue ones, whether they're solid, like on this case, or dashed. I think there's a dashed one over there at Bradford Hills. Yeah. Just indicates that there has been traffic calming installed already. So most people know where to go if they want to drive on a speed cushion and see what those feel like. But if you don't, you can come to this map and find places nearby where something has already been installed. And then the last color I think is important is the purple one. Those are streets that have applied for traffic calming, but they have not yet been selected. So you may be curious of other streets in your area. Has anyone ever put in an application? So you can come to this map and see that information there. So again, we're not actively working on anything on those streets, but we do have an application on file. All right, I'm going to go through some of the more common tools that we have in this toolbox, things that we can deploy on these streets. The first one has really become the bread and butter of this program. Probably most people think of us as the speed cushion program, and for good reason. We use a lot of them. They have really become the go-to tool for most of our streets. Number one, we like it because it's consistent. These are manufactured devices. You may have encountered speed cushions or speed humps that are made out of asphalt or concrete. Those are fine too, but what we do like about these is everyone's the same. So they drive the same, they feel the same from neighborhood to neighborhood. They're very recognizable. They're holding up very well. Some of these have been out now 10 or 12 years, and they're performing very well. They come in different configurations, as you can see from some of these pictures. Sometimes they're 2 wide, sometimes they're 3. We've gone up to probably 5 wide or so. All of that just depends on how wide the street is. And so that's where that 30-foot wide dimension for Barnes Cove Drive comes in, that we just need to make sure that we're covering the width of the road and not leaving enough of a space that someone can just drive around these, because they will. In your case, you've got a curb on either edge of the road, so that's going to prevent somebody from leaving the road. But we've had people actually drive off the side of the road in order to avoid them. If we let them do that, that kind of obviously voids the purpose of it. And so you only get the speed reduction if people drive over these. The gaps in between come from an emergency response consideration. So we don't want to slow down larger vehicles like fire trucks, ambulances, and so forth. And so we place these in such a way as an ambulance can almost straddle them, not quite, but they can come a lot closer than you or I can in our cars. And so that's the point about the gap. And for that reason, we're using these more than about any other. We really like to have that minimum impact on those very important services. They're about 3 inches tall. They're always 6 feet wide. That's kind of the wheelbase, so that most of our cars cannot straddle those. But we can vary the length of them. We can get them the shortest one is a 7-foot cushion, and they go up to 14. We've really settled in on a 10.5-foot cushion for most of our applications in a suburban area like this. I think it will give us a good fit. But we look at various design considerations when we're choosing that. You do see the signage there in the upper left-hand picture. That's a pretty typical application of the signs that are used at most of these locations. Move on to the next one here, which is a pretty close cousin to the speed cushion, is the speed table. It's made by the same company, same recycled rubber material. Just the obvious difference is it doesn't have those gaps in it. For that reason, we don't use these as often. Sometimes there's a specialized consideration that we might use a speed table, but we really try to stay with the cushions as much as possible. We do have some before and after data, and we've got more very recently that we're working on formatting now. I'm a little hesitant to use it just because every street's a little bit different. The layout's different. You're starting from different speeds. As I mentioned, yours is 35 miles an hour, but we are seeing, as this data would indicate, a pretty good reduction in speed once the speed cushions go in. Something on the order of 9 to 11 miles an hour, but again, every street's a little bit different there. Another tool that we do have in our toolbox is the feedback sign. This kind of gets to that educational component that we mentioned earlier. Basically does what it says, and you guys have probably seen these as well. We will deploy a feedback sign. A lot of times when we can't put in something like a speed cushion, that might be a steep hill. That might be we have driveways that are too closely spaced and we don't want to block somebody's driveway with a speed cushion. There's a number of reasons. Maybe the traffic volume is too high. And so we will opt for something like this that may not quite be so impactful to a lot of traffic on the street. It just gives you your feedbacks. It just gives you the speed that you're going in. And a lot of times just getting that feedback to a driver, you may not realize you're coming down a hill and you're going as fast as you are, and sometimes that sign can be a big help. The before and after data here, probably a little bit more susceptible to familiarity. The longer that sign stays out and the more you drive by it every day, it may kind of blend into the background, but a lot of people in our neighborhoods say no, it absolutely does its job, and it does a great job, and they're very happy to have them. So, pavement markings can be a tool for us. As I mentioned, sometimes the wider the street, the more comfortable it is to go faster. So sometimes we can put pavement markings out there to narrow the street and make it feel a little tighter, like you might have in more of an urban area. There are some specialized uses of that, like the safer shoulder. We can, in a very wide street, maybe we want to carve out some of that pavement width and not only narrow the street, but give people a place to walk. That's a good option, especially if you don't have sidewalks in your neighborhood. We can also do specialized things at intersections, particularly very large sweeping intersections. You guys are probably familiar with some of those that have gone in on Bradford Hills. We get a lot of feedback on those. So we're aware of that. That's not a good fit for every street, but it can have a good impact. Again, if you've got really high speeds turning onto or off of a street, sometimes we'll look at doing that. Particularly in more urban areas where you have more sidewalk, more pedestrian activity, it can be helpful. There's also different ways to handle it. I know in that case that I mentioned, there are some delineators that are out there. We can do different things like in the upper right-hand picture that you see, and actually like an old school speed bump like you might see at the Kroger or Home Depot. You don't want to run over those at a high speed either, and they're a little more low profile, and sometimes people think they fit into the neighborhood better. So we do have some different options on roll outs. Chicanes are a very specialized one. There's only 2 or 3 streets in all of Davidson County that have these. It can be effective in an urban area where you already have some on-street parking. It creates an artificial meandering, but we don't have a lot of before and after data on these. We don't do very many of them either. One that's new that we're kind of looking for just the right street, because I think it takes just the right street for this to be a good and safe improvement, is a choke point where cars literally cannot pass. They have to yield to each other as they wind their way through this. Again, there's 1 or 2 of these in Davidson County, and so not use them often, but on a very low volume street, probably not yours. 2,200 cars is probably more than we're looking for on something like this, but can be effective. And then the last one, traffic circle, particularly when we're trying to calm two streets that intersect. You have to have a lot of pavement. It takes a very large area to accommodate something like this, and even still, we have a lot of some impacts when we have done these with school buses and other large vehicles like that can have trouble navigating them. But that's kind of the point. You make it sort of hard, and you have to slow down in order to turn around these things. All right, I've done a lot of talking, and I want to come to the point where if you're comfortable and want to give some feedback, this would be the place to. This is a picture, and I'm assuming those of you that I see a telephone number, that may mean that you can't see these slides, and so I recognize that, and I'll try to walk through clearly what we're looking at here. So this is a picture of Barnes Cove Drive. Barnes Road end of the project is on the left. That would be north. I turned it sideways, so sorry if you're map inclined. You're having to look sideways. I mean, north is to the left. And then it goes from left to right down to Avery Park end of the project on the right-hand side of your screen. We have stops at those two ends. We also have the always stop shown there at Alteris Drive. So the project is kind of cut in half with that always stop there. The segment there is colored purple, just that purple line. And then underneath that purple line are some bright yellow highlighted areas. Those just indicate that we know that there are some pretty significant hills there. This is a hilly neighborhood, hilly part of the county. And so that can be a somewhat of a design consideration, maybe a design limitation for us. We don't do speed cushions when the slope gets more than 8%. We try not to do them if the slope is more than 5%. So we're paying attention to that, and I've just highlighted for us here where roughly those hilly areas are. What we are seeing here, the proposal is a speed cushion based project, as most of them are. And I have laid out here 5 different locations for a set of speed cushions. Here's the way we typically come up with that, whether it's 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 sets of speed cushions. The way we determine that is we look at the total length of the project, and then we divide it by what's our ideal spacing for a set of speed cushions. We know that if we can space them something in the order of 400 to 600 feet, that's usually close enough together that cars don't clear one set of speed cushions and then step on the gas just to get to the next one as quick as possible, because as you're clearing one set, you can see the next one up there, and so the idea is that you would just proceed in a slow fashion all the way through the corridor. But it's also far enough apart, hopefully, that it's not totally obnoxious to you all who have to drive over them every day, and also that wouldn't push traffic to some other street. So we try to take both aspects into consideration, and have found that if we're somewhere in that 400 to 600 foot range, that typically gives us a pretty good result. It can be a little closer together, usually more urban areas. It can be a little further apart, more rural areas. And so that's how we come up with the number of speed cushions that we propose. In this case, because of these hills, it's kind of like 2 different projects. On the north side of the stop sign at Alteris, so between Barnes and Alteris, we only have 2 sets of speed cushions shown. I don't think that gives us a bad result. I just think the spacing there is a little bit longer than what we would like to see. But that is totally because of the pretty significant long hill that happens there, kind of centered between Valencia and Barnes Cove Court. So that's part of the consideration. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of great tools that we have other than to use on a hilly place like that. The radar feedback sign could be an exception, and so we could look at maybe supplementing in that middle area if we thought that was important to do something like that. On the south side of the always stop, so between Alteris and Avery Park, I think we're able to get really good spacing, probably on the lower end of that 400 to 600, probably 450 or so feet. between sets of speed cushions. That's more in that Lennox. I think that part is kind of considered Lennox Village. Y'all can correct me on that, but it's that end of the project. Just not as much hill area in that location, and so we have 3 sets of speed cushions proposed there. You may notice there's one other little kind of post-it note looking thing. I did notice as I did come out there and take a look at this one prior to the meeting, you have some pavement markings that conflict with the actual posted speed. The posted speed is 25 miles an hour. It's signed appropriately that way, but there's some old residual pavement markings that say it's 30, so we would clean those up by removing that. And then the other thing is, I think Lennox Village has some private signing that actually says the speed limit is 30. So we would work towards, making sure that those are fixed or replaced with other speed limit signs as well. Just some kind of housekeeping items as part of the project as well. That's a lot of information. I'm sorry to talk so much. I'd love to hear from anyone if, any feedback on this. Is it what you were expecting? Is it not what you were hoping? You love it, you hate it, you want us to go away? Anything you want to tell us about that? Howard, I see your hand, so feel free to unmute if you're so inclined.
Thanks a lot, Jeff and John. Thanks for kicking this whole project off. I do appreciate and I do recognize the speed issues that we have in this neighborhood. I think you went over your list of potential tools to use. And you may have covered it and I may have missed it for an instance, but have we considered rumble strip?
We haven't, and I didn't mention rumble strips. And rumble strips, if you're not familiar, is where we just take, usually it's just the flat line pavement marking like you would see on the edge line, and just layer a bunch of them together in succession so that when you drive over it, you get the rumble effect. It shakes the steering wheel just a little bit and creates a vibration for you. We typically use those for a very specific condition. Maybe it's a crosswalk that's coming up. Maybe there's a stop ahead, and we want to call a specific attention to that one feature. That's when we use rumble strips the most. So it can be helpful, in certain circumstances, but it's not going to give us a good slow speed along the length of the project. That's why we don't include them, as a go-to tool in our toolbox, but they can be a good supplement to other things.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Jeff. I appreciate that. No, so far everything you're shown here kind of makes sense. I do want to kind of highlight one concern since I live on this particular street, and I've witnessed 2 vehicle accidents already. Specifically, the downward hill from Barnes Cove toward Valencia Court. It's going down straight, but then it's quick turn left. And the rumble strip, but in my opinion, and others on the call may want to chime in as well, is I like to bring attention to that because I've seen the incidents where they're going down quite fast and not realizing a quick turn. It's coming down toward the bottom of the hills, right before Valencia Court kind of started. Just something to consider. But one question about the speed cushion, is it comparable to the one on Sunnywood Drive?
Probably. I'm not exactly familiar with what Sunnywood does, but I say probably because we use essentially the same speed cushions on every project. Assuming it's not a speed hump that goes all the way across the road in one big bar, then it will be very, very similar. It could have a slight difference in that if it were the length was different than and I don't know again what was proposed on or what was installed on Sunnywood, but yeah, I would say it's going to be a very similar type of feel.
Okay, thank you. It kind of gives me some sense of comparison.
Okay,
looking at.
I want to mention your other comment, which I think is a good one. About the downhill coming in fast to that curve. I'm looking at Google. I don't see a warning sign. Typically, that's how you would address that. Is you would post it that there is a warning sign. At that point, if it were posted, then you could rumble strip, again, just to call attention to that sign and that condition. So that's certainly something we can look at. But I will also say this, a lot of times people in these meetings say, hey, we got a blind crosswalk, or there's a sight distance issue pulling out of an intersection, and all these kind of things that we typically don't address with a traffic calming project, except for, and we like to point this out, I see that just on the other side of Valencia, we have a proposed speed cushion because the street flattens out right there, and I think it'd be a good spot for something. That in and of itself, bringing people to a slower speed, if you drive that every day, you're going to know there's a speed cushion there, and there's a good chance that you're going to already slow down more than you do today as you approach that curve, just knowing that that's coming. So that's another consideration, that a lot of times if we can slow traffic down, it takes care of a bunch of different issues that, any one of them by themselves, we may have to sign or do something else. But if we just had slower speeds, it can be a big help all the way across. Good question. I see Dawn has a hand up.
Hey, Jeff. And thanks so much for, meeting with us on this. I would, I think this looks good. I do have, similar concerns to what Howard brought up regarding, right, just the overall speed coming down the hill on Barnes Cove Drive coming in, towards Valencia Court. If we could potentially, evaluate having those radar signs, just because I don't think people realize always how fast that they are going, especially as you're going down that hill. That may be something that could help slow some people down before they get to Valencia Court and that curve in the road there.
Okay. And as I'm looking at it, I see some trees, and it looks like the sight distance may be a little worse in that direction that you guys are both describing than in the other direction. Maybe having that feedback sign there would, again, kind of tip you off, that you are in a traffic calm, in a speed cushion environment, and slow you down prior to it. So I think that has some merit as well. I'll make a note of that.
Yeah, and I would say where you have, and I'm just where the speed cushion there right after Valencia Court that you have, it is it's just at the bottom of the hill or top, depending upon which direction you're, like getting ready to start ascending the hill. Is that any concern? Because it's really flat right at Valencia Court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then so Valencia Court is kind of right in the middle of that curve. And so once you make that curve, it's not really super flat anymore. It's already starting to ascend. I don't know what the percentage is there as far as, the incline, but just something to think about when you guys are looking at the location of where to put that speed cushion right there around Valencia Court.
Yeah, definitely. There's a couple of considerations that, I don't want it to be blind. I don't want you to be coming down the hill and not see it's there. I mean, we can't assume everybody that's driving on your street lives there and does it every day. So we would like to push it a little bit. Also, I can't put it in Valencia, so it's got to be away from it on one side or the other. And then the slope that we're looking at, if we're below about 5%, we're okay. So, and I think we'll be there for a little ways away from Valencia on the south side of it as you start going back up the hill. So I think it's probably in the better side, but that's totally something that we'll look at when we're out there. If it's on one side or the other, if Valencia was like a through route and went somewhere, it may make sense to push it on one side or the other. It looks like there's 6 houses or so on Valencia, so it's not a huge traffic, destination. So whichever, it's more about what side can you see it, what side has lesser slope consideration, all that kind of stuff. So definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Jeff, looks like we have a question in the chat. regarding maybe performance of these speed cushion in the event of snow or ice.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, I see that. Thanks. So this comes up occasionally. Like, what do you do when it snows? Just the general answer there is NDOT's snow removal crews, and again, I don't know if this is a plowed route or not. It may be. It really doesn't matter. They keep a GIS map. They have GIS on their plow trucks, so they know when they're on a speed cushion street. And again, we have those signs. That's another clue. We don't have too many snows in Nashville that would totally blanket these and cover them up, but that is a question that we get, and it's something that NDOT snow removal crews are very good at dealing with. I know that's probably not what's being asked. What's being asked is, as you try to get a running start and it's slick and it's icy, it can be hard to get a running start, stop at that always stop and keep going. My guess is under those conditions, you don't stop. Once you get going, you just keep going, and I don't blame you. So we don't have anything planned very near there. That's another part of us not putting speed cushions on that hill. We're going to steer clear of that hill. The closest we will be is, again, like we just talked about, either the top or bottom of that hill. But very good observation.
So with these speed cushion, would it collect additional snow or ice along the edges that would prevent us from traversing?
No, not along the edges. It won't affect drainage at all. These streets are crowned, and so unless y'all tell me differently, like there's some ponding issues at the bottom of the hill or whatever, the way the way these streets are designed to work is there's a crown in the middle of the road. All the water goes to that concrete curb in the outside. We don't put the speed cushions all the way to the curb. We'll be well short. We won't even be in the gutter pan, so we don't have. I don't know of any instances where we've had any kind of drainage or freezing, ponding water, creating ice pockets or anything like that. And you see it here, I do show a 3 cushion layout. When we have a street this wide, we're going to need those 3 cushions. I wish we could depend on park cars. Actually, are a good thing for speed reduction. It just kind of puts that obstacle in the street, again, narrows things down. You probably see that more on the Lenox Village end. I noticed more parked cars when I was there on that end. The houses are closer together. They're a little closer to the street. Some of you may have noticed that you probably just naturally go slower on that area. I did when I was out there just because of that context. Anyway, back to the width though. I think it's going to require 3 cushions. You can still park on them. You can park exactly where you did today. If you want to park on one of the cushions on the side, it doesn't hurt them. So we try not to change the function of the street or do so as little as possible. So, I wouldn't expect any changes in how people park or where they put their trash cans, where they put the brush pile, all that kind of stuff. We recognize that.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that the street parking can slow people down, and of course we have the wide streets, and we do have parking on the street. I was wondering if there's anything in this that might address the street parking that's at the end of Barnes Cove Drive by Barnes Road. The reason I bring that up specifically is the road actually slightly narrows as you come to Barnes Road, and there are signs just so many feet from Barnes Road that say no parking from this point to Barnes Road. But that often gets ignored, and if you're coming in there at the wrong time, it's really just a one-way because you'll have people parking on that narrow portion, and only one car can go through at a time. And I didn't know if there's anything as part of this that might address that particular issue.
There is not, but that's not to say we can't. I'm looking at that end to see. Is it the little white sign? It's not a standard kind of street sign looking thing.
You mean the no parking sign?
The no parking sign.
Yeah, it's just a tiny little sign.
I bet I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, there's one guy that he parks a like a work vehicle of some sort on the street there, and like he knows the sign because he's always parked right at the sign. But there'll be people that will park beyond where he parks, you know, within the part where you're not supposed to have parking between that sign and Barnes Road. And as I said, it narrows just a bit. So if you have people parked on both sides, which you often do, especially in the evening time, it can go down to where only one car can get through at a time.
Yeah. Well, the other thing you've got is you've got a separate left turn lane and right turn lane out. So you introduce 3 lanes where on most of the street you just have 2, 1 in each direction. Now you've got 3, and that's why you don't want parking. I mean, I don't know how much traffic's going left versus going right. One option would be you take that away and you move it down to 1 lane, you know, for left turn and right turn. Y'all may say that's a terrible idea. I hate sitting behind somebody that's turning left. It takes forever. I don't know that, but
I think most is going left because it's taking you over to Nolensville Road.
Yeah. So, I mean, the downside there would be if you are going right, you're going to be held up a little bit. That may not be a big deal. The other way to do it would be, you know, again, just I think more standard street signs that might look a little more enforceable. That, you know, you shouldn't be parking there. They can ticket that. The way it is now, that does not look to me like an official, actual no parking prohibition. In other words, I don't know that they could write a ticket on that. I think you might have to go actually through Traffic and Parking Commission, who is the board that oversees sort of the rules of the road with that. But they could certainly pass a no parking restriction there. And then you would have a standard, you know, no parking this side of the street sign, like you would be accustomed to seeing on a metro street. So could do either one of those. And I think we probably wouldn't incorporate it into the plans unless it was that striping. If you said, no, let's just do 1 lane out like the rest of the street and not have this separate left turn, right turn stuff, we could incorporate that and do that work as part of the project. If you just wanted to remove officially parking on one side of the street, I think that can be done independently. We can certainly help facilitate that through the commission.
Okay, I think it's something that definitely needs to be addressed. You know, what the best approach to that is, I'm not sure, but
Okay.
I do think it's an ongoing continual issue, and it's certainly got to be an aggravation for the people who live more towards that end of Barnes Cove Drive.
Yeah, it seems like that could be a hazard. You know, as you come in off Barnes, you know, having that blocked up right there is not ideal for sure.
Yeah.
Let me shop that back through NDOT and see. You know, they may say, do we want to do a little count and see how much of that traffic is actually turning left versus right, and you know.
Okay.
Anyway, we'll take a look at that and see what we want to do.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a good mention. Anything else?
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit to that too. I mean, my preference would be to deter the parking rather than take away the turning lanes.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna move on, but I'll be glad to come back to this slide and talk about, you know, if you got other aspects of it you think of or questions, feel free. But let me move on to where we are now and where we are going tonight. We were at this red circle. This is our neighborhood meeting. After tonight, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like we have, you know, reasonable consensus over kind of the bulk theory of the plan, which would be a speed cushion based plan, where we can get them, and then maybe we supplement that with a feedback sign there on that hill. I think that's a good suggestion. In any event, we will formulate that into a formal design plan package. They're not very technical. I think most people can pick it up and kind of see what we're doing, but we'll give more detail. We'll actually come out, make field measurements, and tell you on the design plans exactly where we're proposing these. It'll say something like, we want to put a set of speed cushions 62 feet from the driveway at 123 Barnes Cove Drive, something like that. And so you will know exactly where they're being proposed. We will publish those design plans online. At that point, we can have a decision to make. as a group. We can come back to you. We can talk through this. If you want to know more about what's happening at the intersection or any aspect of this, if there's a disagreement on what we ought to do, we're happy to come back and do the second neighborhood meeting. That's the little pale blue circle that you see there. But we don't have to. We used to do a mandatory 2 meetings, but in a lot of cases, the neighbors would say, this doesn't look any different than what you told us last time. I wish we had just used that time and moved it forward. So we're happy to do it either way. That's kind of up to you. And Dawn, I see your hand. I'll come back to you. After that, whether we do a second meeting or whether we don't, and we go straight from design, we then go into the ballot process. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Depending on the results of the ballot, assuming it passes, we would then get into the construction queue. And I point all of this out, and you may see the time listed with each of those: 2 months, 1 month, 2 months, 10 months. Just to say, we don't know exactly what's going to take. We do know the ballot process is a mandatory 6 weeks, but aside from that, sometimes we're just waiting. And so we say this to say, don't expect us to be having traffic calming installed out there, by St. Patrick's Day or something. It's not going to be that fast. And so from this point tonight to actually having anything on the street in the form of a project is probably like 8 months to a year, something like that. So I just like to point that out so you have an expectation of the time frame we're working on here. Dawn, did you have a question about that or comment?
I had an overall comment actually. And is there a cost to the neighborhood for installing these?
Not in the vein that we're working now. There is an opportunity. Sometimes a developer comes in and wants to do traffic calming or whatever. We do have opportunities for a what we call neighborhood funded application, but you're not in that path. You were selected based on the need from the traffic data. So no, for this project, there is no cost to your neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One last one. Sorry, Jeff.
Sure. No problem.
These traffic calming programs, the intention is to be permanent moving forward, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are permanent. I know maybe the devices that we're installing, I'd say they're semi-permanent, in that they come in, they don't tear up the road, we bolt them in. They'll do this project in probably 2 days and be out of there. There's not a lot of dust, there's not a lot of mess. The other good side about that, though, is while we intend them to be permanent, they can be removed. And so if there's a paving project, if there's a water line, if we're having to be blocking where they need to make a sewer cut or whatever, we can unbolt these, move them, and put them back. But the intent is not that we come in here, bolt these down, and for a year we traffic calm the street and then we reassess it. We have not been doing that. It's not to say we couldn't, but we intend that once these are in, if it gets torn up, it becomes it's a typical maintenance asset of the DOT. So if one gets plowed up or torn up by somebody, it would be replaced just like a normal any other street asset.
Okay. Can the neighborhood maybe come to a consensus sometime down the road if we decided to, let's say, traffic has been calm, the people that traverse these roads are now educated, we don't see the speed issue anymore, can we have them removed?
Possibly.
Is there an avenue for that?
No, there's not. We nothing formal, at least. And in the years that we've been doing this, which is probably I don't know, at least 5 or 6, I would say at this point that we've been installing these speed cushions, we haven't had those removed on purpose yet. So that's not to say it couldn't. I mean, I think it would be fine. It's certainly feasible to do that again, because they can easily be unbolted as easily as they can be bolted. So we don't have a process to do that and haven't had that request yet.
Thanks, Jeff. And sorry, I said one last, but I do have one last one.
That's all right. Yeah.
Have we ever, kind of carry out the program in a more progressively more increasing level of insulation, meaning we'll do some signage or some sort of things before we permanently put in these, you said it's not permanent, but before we put in these speed cushion, just
Sort
to
of,
see
sort
if,
of kind of a trial and error, sort of wade into it.
yeah,
We'll get that question a lot because people say, you know, that would be a good, and I don't disagree at all. It would be a good thing to do if we could start by feedback signs maybe and see how that worked. The problem is, as we pointed out, with as much demand as we have for the program, we just don't have a lot of resources to come in and work systematically through such a process. I hate to say it, but it's kind of like this is the traffic calming project for Barnes Cove. If you put something in and it causes a real problem, obviously the city's not going to just walk away from that. But at the same time, there's not a lot of capacity to go in and do kind of a trial and error on every street that we do. But if you think about it, I think about it this way: we're doing 50 projects a year. That means we ought to be turning one of these out a week. We certainly don't have time to go back and do multiple iterations on each of those. So for that reason, I'd say no. It's kind of, we'll do our best engineering on the front end and try to get it right the first time.
Thank you, Jeff.
Mm-hmm. Let me talk a little bit about the balloting because that is an important aspect to this. I mentioned that we're not here to say this project is happening in this format, but it sounds like something we're certainly moving towards. But you all get a very formal say in that. All your neighbors do, and so there is a ballot process that we follow when we're doing something like speed cushions. The way that works is we will send out these ballots to every property owner along this section of street to be traffic calmed. I'll show you that in just a second. It's a real easy process. It's a QR code. You just scan it. It goes take you to our voting page, and you basically just say who you are, what property you're representing, and whether you like the project or not. We keep that open for 6 weeks, and at the end of that time, we tally those results. And if 2/3 of the people have voted in favor of the project, we will move it forward. The people who will get that opportunity. This is a kind of a weird map. This is weirder than most, but I'll explain it. So, as I mentioned, these will go to the property owners who have the parcels that abut the right of way of Barnes Cove within our project limits. The reason this map looks a little weird, it looks like some parcels are surrounded, is because some of that is just like common area for subdivision, green space, it's sometimes called. And so that is the right of way that actually abuts the street. We won't be balloting that because the other stipulation is that it must be an occupied property. It can't be vacant. So we would consider common area just to be vacant land and it would not be eligible for a vote. But you see all the other parcels there. You may live on the corner of one of the courts, Valencia Court or something, and maybe your address is even Valencia Court, but if your property abuts Barnes Cove, you live on the corner, then you would get the opportunity to vote as well. I don't think we have any apartments or anything like that. I don't see any HPRs, which are just where you have two owners on a single parcel. But in any event, that's who gets the ballot. It's only residential properties. I think that's all you have here. I don't think you have any commercial, and it does have to be a non-vacant, meaning there's got to be a building on it. If the house is vacant, I don't know that. So we will still ballot those. Any questions about eligibility there? Oh, if someone does own multiple properties, we just send that owner one ballot. You don't get to vote. You don't get to vote for every property that you represent. Okay. That pretty well wraps it up. That's the information that we've got. Feel free to get in touch with us if you think of other questions or have concerns or anything else. That NDOT traffic calming at Nashville.gov email is a good one. I know it's generic, but that's because there's more than one staff member that monitors that. So feel free to email them or copy them. Feel free to email me. I'm the green one below. I'm Jeff. That's Jeff Hammond at birchtransportation.com. And then, as I mentioned at the start, there's also opportunity there at NDOT.Nashville.gov. Websites and QR codes and emails all over the place. Feel free to use those and get in touch with us. Lastly, I did want to just share this. Make sure you have it. The Traffic Calming website, TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov. Yet another QR code. You'll find a lot of resources there. This meeting will be posted there, the recording of this meeting. The design plans, when it comes time, will be there. That interactive map that we looked at is there. You can find the results of every ballot we've ever done. If you think, how often do these things pass, you can go check it out and scroll through and see the results. There's just a lot of information there about traffic calming in our programs. Anything final before we wrap up tonight? Sorry, went a little bit longer, a little over an hour, but good discussion. It was worth it. Hope you think so.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
The voting is the voting the design, or is it actually we can vote whether we want it or not?
It's voting for the specific project. So we won't open that ballot until we've got that design. It's been posted. We've reached as much consensus as I think we're going to reach. That's what you're voting on. It would be the specific project. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So basically,
If
this is moving forward without a vote of the neighborhood, but the vote of the neighbors would be whether we want cushions or the type of project. Is that correct?
essentially, that's right. So let me clarify it this way and say, what happens if it fails? If we put this project and people say, nah, I don't think speed cushions are for us, and I'm going to vote against it. If we don't get 2/3 of the people in support, we don't walk away from the project. We just do a different type of project. And we assume in that people are voting against speed cushions. I think we know that. So what we would do instead is we might do a feedback sign based plan, or we might put some, pavement markings or something like that. But we're not going to put the speed cushions that you have to drive over. So that's how we handle that. We call it a plan B. If it fails, we'll do a plan B project. So we consider those to be not as effective from a speed reduction standpoint, but we also think it better meets the neighborhood's desire for what they want to see on their street.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Is there any discussion here on whether we want to come back and do a second meeting, or are you comfortable enough with what we've got that we might do some minor tweaks and we're ready to move forward? Any comment on that?
I think it might be a little bit too early for me to speak on behalf of everybody else in the neighborhood. But I think everybody probably needs to be educated on what's coming first before we decide.
Okay.
Right.
Councilman, I can probably just work with you on that. What you're hearing, if we're getting a lot of feedback, maybe on the Engage page or through email, maybe that will slant us one way or the other. But we'll make that decision on whether we think we want to come back and do a second meeting or not. We're fine either way.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much. Thanks for the good discussion. Thanks for your interest in this project. Thank you for your interest in safe streets in Nashville. It's really important to all of us. And so with that, I wish you a very good evening. Be safe out there and talk to you soon.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Bye.